Has done this before. Let me thank each and every one of you for the privilege of your time, and I'll brag on the superintendent and the chair of our board and others that are assembled, including Dr. Galley, just in a moment. But I want to talk a little bit about this week. Just a couple days ago on Monday, we announced the state was going to reach an historic milestone, a surplus the likes of which no other state in American history has ever experienced. $75.7 billion, almost a $76 billion operating surplus in the state of California. We marked that moment by making a point that the superintendent just made. We're not coming back as a state. The state is roaring back after a pandemic-induced recession. We're mindful that by no stretch of the imagination are where we want to be, but we're also mindful of the fact that in February, California created 41%. Californians created 41% of America's jobs. This state is indeed coming roaring back. With that surplus comes a great deal of responsibility to be more accountable, more transparent, and to address some of these systemic issues, many of which we're assembled here today to announce and discuss. We started, though, by providing an assurance to the people of the state of California, the taxpayers of the state of California, particularly those that have been most impacted by COVID-19, that we see you and we have your back. And we announced a $12 billion commitment, the largest state tax rebate in American history to families earning up to $75,000. 78%, almost 80% of taxpayers, tax filers will receive a direct check, a direct stimulus, and a supplemental check if those tax filers have children under the age of 6 years old. Just yesterday, we announced an historic investment in one of the pre-existing conditions in this state, and that's the issue of poverty in its most acute form and manifestation, the issue of homelessness. An equivalent amount of money, $12 billion, 10x what we committed to address the issue of homelessness just last year. 10x what we committed last year to address the issue of homelessness, to focus on ending family homelessness within 5 years, to address what's happening on the streets and sidewalks, and to address the comprehensive need to not only address those that are acutely challenged, but also provide supports so that we can prevent homelessness in the first place, to provide those supplemental rent payments, to provide first and last month's rent, to provide those emergency grants to millions of Californians that are one paycheck away from ending up on the streets and sidewalks. We also announced a commitment, and was reminded of this just driving up here, that this state needs to clean itself up. We actually need to clean the streets. We need to clean the thoroughfares and the entrances and exits to major communities like yours, that we have to address some of the accumulation on the side of our freeways of mattresses and all the illegal dumping, and that we could beautify this state as well in the process. It's not just about removing litter, it's about bringing back a sense of pride and community and re-engaging our artists up and down the state. And we put an historic investment just 2 years ago. It was $60 million to invest in litter removal statewide. The announcement we made yesterday was $1.5 billion to not only pick up litter, but to beautify our thoroughfares and beautify this state. I say all of that to contextualize this moment because so often a week like this, you hear a lot of numbers, talk in terms of superlatives. I made this point on Monday. You're going to be hearing a lot that may sound like hyperbole, talking in historic terms, transformative terms. But the reality is we are talking in historic terms and transformational terms. And I hope people are paying attention, because what I'm about to say I never thought I'd ever have a chance to say as a Californian, let alone as governor of this state. What I'm about to announce today is incredible privilege as a fifth-generation Californian, as someone with 4 young children, as someone who cares deeply about this community, cares deeply about all of our children. The opportunity to share with you this budget is one of the most exciting things I've ever had the privilege and opportunity to do. You heard from Linda Darling-Hammond. She talked in those historic terms. She talked about transformation. The superintendent about the opportunity to speak, as well as Dr. Galley, not in terms of marginal investments in the millions, but transformational investments in the billions. On Friday, we will submit to the legislature a May revise. It will include the highest historic investment in K through 14 education in California's history. But with that, we are looking to transform, not go back to where we were, but to transform our educational system. And we are putting out a blueprint over the next 5 years for total transformation. And that blueprint includes creating a new grade and fully implementing a commitment that all 4-year-olds will get high quality instructional education by creating that new grade. TK will now be fully implemented in the state of California, a $2.7 billion investment. We've often said this, people, we talk about achievement gaps. It's a readiness gap as much or more than it is an achievement gap. People aren't left behind as often as they start behind. And that's why that investment is so foundational and so important. 3 hours minimum of instructional time is connected with that TK investment. We recognize that we need to provide more enrichment. We need to provide more wraparound services. We need to do more in the classroom to recognize the issues outside the classroom. Why are we here? Because you're doing about as well or better than any community in this state. The fact that this school, this elementary school, has washers and dryers, not for the kids, but for families, says a lot about the society and the world we're living in. But also says a lot about the resourcefulness of this community, a recognition that we need to break down those silos between the community we're working in and the community we're serving and educating in. And that's exactly what this budget commits to do. We've talked a lot about community schools over the years, but we haven't followed up with real resources. We put in 10 million here, 20 million here, we put 100 million over a few years there, but we've never made a commitment like this. $3 billion for community schools and wraparound services all up and down the state of California to build on many of these models of success. And we'll talk about that enrichment in a moment and in the Q&A about what that looks like and what that means. But one of the things that I'm so proud of is the thing that brought Dr. Galley down here today, and that's to get serious about the issue of brain health, get serious about the issue of adolescent mental health, to get serious about reconciling the fact that the brain is also part of the body and that we need to do more and better to address, as the superintendent talked about his own trauma as a child, but talk about the trauma that so many have experienced over the course of last year, but for that matter, over the course of the last few decades. Issues of anxiety and deep depression leading to tragic outcomes. I don't need to enumerate all those tragic outcomes. You live it here in this community at the school. So many communities struggling because of lack of access to counselors and support services. What we're doing today is something we've never done in state history. It literally brought Dr. Galley down. We were sitting in the back a moment ago. He said, "Do you realize that we're actually about to make this announcement?" He goes, "Of all the things I thought I'd have a privilege to do, I never thought we'd actually be here just 2.5 years into the administration. And we're here because of all of you and the extraordinary surplus that provides this privilege." But $4 billion commitment for wellness, for mental health, a $4 billion commitment for universal screening and access to real treatment based upon need for every child 0 to 25 in the state of California, the most comprehensive, transformational youth behavioral health commitment this state has ever made. That's also part of the announcement we're making here today. And I want to thank Dr. Galley for his incredible support and stewardship and leadership, and those points of connection in this opportunity are self-evidently, most importantly, defined by the place and location that so many of our youth are each and every day during the school year. And that's why school-based counselors, wellness centers at school sites are integral in advancing that cause. That's the third of what is just 6 major announcements that we're making here today. Let me briefly sum up the remaining 3 as part of this $20 billion transformational commitment that we are announcing here today. In addition to universal support for all 4-year-olds with TK for all, in addition to the $3 billion for community supports and wraparound services through a community school model, in addition to the $4 billion we announced on behavioral health and mental health for our kids. We also want to fulfill the promise that was made and promoted, and I give the former governor enormous credit for Proposition 49. Arnold Schwarzenegger made a commitment, and the people of California backed that commitment up. Provide support services after school, before school, and support services for activities and enrichment during the summer. That was the After School for All initiative. The problem is that set aside became a ceiling, not just a floor. At about $550 million a year wasn't enough to provide comprehensive after-school programs. And for all the good intention and for all the promotion, we've never been able to fill that universal commitment until today. We are announcing today a commitment that over the next number of years will total $5 billion each and every year, starting with $1 billion this year, but a commitment to fully implement and to fully advance that call for universal after school all up and down the state of California. We're going to get it done once and for all. Honestly, if that alone is all we were announcing, I'd say that's a pretty good year above baseline. But that's not all, and I don't want to sound like a salesman. I'm just an enthusiastic father and member of this community. And I want to just also acknowledge that we can't do all of this without all of you. And I appreciate the superintendent's direct recognition of each and every one of you and the power and potency and importance that was placed years ago by the incredible work of Linda Darling Hammond at Stanford University and all the work she's done nationally advising on education reform. One of her principal calling cards is her expertise, her national leadership on teacher recruitment, teacher training, on supporting teacher residency, grant programs, and supporting opportunities to pay teachers more to invest their talents in communities that are underserved and communities that are under-resourced. $3.3 billion, $3.3 billion for teacher preparedness, $3.3 billion for grants, $3.3 billion to help with residency programs and loans, $3.3 billion to help support those teachers that are helping our poorest and most vulnerable communities with STEM, investing in math and science, and making sure that we have more resources to back up those teachers and those paraprofessionals. So we're really proud of that commitment as well. But we also, in closing, recognize that we also need to reduce a little bit of the stress by reducing the ratios across the spectrum for our teachers. And this budget provides money we have not had in the past. We talk about student-teacher ratios, but we've never had the resources to really address it until now. And we're putting in over $1 billion, $1.1 billion specifically to provide more counselors, more teachers, more support staff at schools all across the state. And we've numerically done it where we want to see no less than 5 in every low-performing school and low-income district in the state of California, minimum, so that we see real equity and real targeted focus at addressing some of those ratios. And by the way, on the TK, we're cutting the ratios in half, from 24 to 1 down to 12 to 1, with an additional $740 million investment. So we mean business when it comes to these ratios. And I'll just conclude by making 2 additional announcements. We talked about, some didn't like the phrase learning loss because they said you can't lose something you never had, which I understood. So we decided to flip that a little bit, and we call our commitment now $2.6 billion commitment this year, our proposal, to talk about accelerated learning. And to talk about accelerated learning through what we refer to as high-dose tutoring. And we want to not double down We want to have interventions with high-dose tutoring to address some of the anxiety and some of the gaps because of the fits and starts over this last school year. And so we're putting an additional $2.6 billion specifically targeted at scientifically based, really effective, high-dose tutoring and investments that we think can make a real impact across the spectrum in our K through 12 education system. But I will just finally say that all that's nice, but one of the things I'm most excited about is this final announcement today. Tune in Friday for more on education. It is one of the issues that just infuriates, I think, all of us is that we live in a society of haves and have-nots. We talk often about income inequality. We don't always talk about wealth inequality as much as I think we should. Talk about assets and the disparities in assets and opportunities. I had the privilege over the course of many, many years, and I had my firstborn, Montana, to open up a 529 account. Not everyone can afford a 529 account. Not everybody can start to seed those investments early on to create a college-going mindset within the family and within the minds of our children. In fact, the vast majority of folks never even heard of a 529 account, can never even imagine getting the tax benefits wealthy families are able to get. One of the things I was very proud of as mayor of San Francisco is we created a small program called Kindergarten to College. We became the first city in the United States of America to open up child college savings accounts to incoming kindergartners. It was a very exciting program. I remember announcing it with the Obama administration, and we've seen it replicated in some communities up and down the state. Last year, we ought to put $25 million to build on some pilots around the state. $25 million was not going to ultimately change the trajectory for folks. And that's why today I'm very pleased to announce that we are going to open up, if we are successful with this proposal, it is not Prop 98 money. This is general fund money. Additional resources to open up 3.7 million child savings accounts, and providing opportunities for every low-income Californian that enters into our school system to have their own personal savings account, seeding it with $500 foster and homeless youth, an additional $500. No state in American history has ever done anything like this at the scale we are committing to do it. And then every first grader coming in will build off that and provide hundreds of millions of dollars of additional resources to build those accounts. If you believe in going to college, you got to create a college-calling mindset. And once a mind is stretched, it never goes back to its original form. A young child with even as little as $400 is 7 times more likely to go into college because they have a modest amount of savings. Without that, you don't even think like that. We're putting $2 billion up to create these accounts and create the opportunity for families to focus on financial literacy, focus on developing assets, and focusing on getting their kids to have a college-going mindset or a trade school mindset. It's about lifelong learning. We're not going to moralize, but we do recognize the world we're entering and the world we're living in, and our children are going to need more beyond the K through 12 or even TK through 12 experience. And so we're poised to do something that the academics have been promoting for decades, and the researchers have said it's one of the best investments in breaking the cycle of poverty. And that's providing something that the vast majority of parents don't even have. And that's a checking and a savings account in that young child's name where they can build up not only assets, but build that mindset in terms of creating that college-going culture. So forgive me for being so long-winded. I'm just profoundly enthusiastic about joining all of you here today. I'm so grateful for this privilege and opportunity to look at transforming public education in the state of California. It was transformed last year for all the wrong reasons. We're now going to transform it in the next 5 years for all the right reasons. And no longer will we be bottom in per pupil expenditures. And this state and our kids, I assure you, are top of our agenda. this. So forgive me again for all the time, but I wanted folks to understand the attention we're placing on these issues and what we hope is the power and potency of this $20 billion transformation of our public education system that we are presenting formally, again, Friday, to the California legislature for their consideration. With that, we are happy to take any questions.
Governor, welcome to the Central Coast. Welcome to the Central Coast. My name is Adriana Frederick Sutton from Univision. I have a question for you. What are you doing regarding the digital divide so that students have access to internet, knowing that it's been a really big problem in the Central Coast and California? Thank you.
We are going to be making a rather significant announcement on Friday, and at my own peril, I think I've announced enough today. I'll leave it at that. But we will not be, I can assure you this, playing in the margins on addressing the digital divide and looking at access, looking at quality, and looking at universal opportunities that not only include access to broadband but devices as well.
Thanks for doing that. Governor, last time we spoke, you said we were on track to meet the June 15th reopening. What does that mean for education come this fall? And is it your belief that schools should be fully reopened come the fall?
Yeah, it is my belief. That's our commitment, it's our resolve, it's our expectation. And it's codified June 30th, midnight, in statute. So we are not only expecting full-time in-person instruction, but we're also backing it up with additional supports, additional resources. I mentioned that $2.6 billion for tutoring, that $2.6 billion for accelerated learning. That $2.6 billion builds on the $4.6 billion that was approved and advanced in a proposal that was codified and supported by the legislature in March, all around supporting our ability to safely reopen our schools for in-person instruction. And so that is the expectation. It's certainly mine and will be the case, again, June 30th at midnight in statute.
Learning loss. Can you tell me a little bit about how you plan on dealing with that this coming summer and fall?
Well, we're looking to expand the opportunities that are being expanded just right here in this elementary school, and that's providing year-round education, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., summer school. They already have a wait list here for summer school. We're seeing the vast majority, I think, Mr. Superintendent, it's 90+% of the districts providing summer school enrichment across the board, resources they've never had in the past to be able to do that and support those enrichment and wrap-around activities and supports. And we also are looking, and Linda's been talking a lot about this, writing a lot about this. Look, we're still stuck on an agrarian calendar. That means a lot more here in Monterey County than in other parts of the state. But this notion that we have to be stuck in a mindset for a world that's changed a bit from bygone eras suggests perhaps we can reimagine and rethink the school day, the school year, and start to provide the kind of flexibility and resources that are necessary to do that. And we're allowing, in the language we refer to as our trailer bill, as well as the resources we're putting up to provide districts like this the ability to reimagine their school year and their enrichment programs to address not just learning loss, thank you, but also to accelerate learning and address equity foundationally. And again, this $20 billion proposal today is all around equity and closing gaps and advancing the needs of low-income communities and providing the same resources that districts where I send my kids are afforded.